Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Oswego Alumni Podcast. The views and opinions expressed in this episode are those of the guests and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Oswego Alumni Association, SUNY Oswego, or any of its officials. Email us with guest ideas or any other feedback at alumni@oswego.edu.
Welcome to the Oswego Alumni Podcast. I'm your host, Dee Perkins. When you think of the largest events in the world, you may be thinking about what goes on behind the scenes. But today's guest has spent close to 30 years obsessing over event operations. He's been a part of 11 Olympic and Paralympic Games, Super Bowls, and FIFA World Cups. And today he's taken his years of experience to develop TPT Hub. It's a software suite dedicated to bringing efficiencies to the events world. Let's welcome class of 1990s, Derrick Salisbury.
Hey, Dee, how are you doing?
Oh my God, look at that background and the shirt. You're doing better than me.
Hey, try to style and profile in Oswego State style today.
Oh my God, I love it. All right, so you win the award of the furthest interviewee on this podcast. Tell everybody where you are zooming in from.
Well, today I'm calling you from our home base for my company, TPT Hub in Dubai, United Arab Emirates. So way halfway across the globe from Oswego.
And when people think of Dubai, they think hot, they think sandy. Tell me about the weather today.
Yeah, today's one of those monsoonal days that rarely comes to this market, and it's a very rainy day. Yesterday was beautiful and gorgeous, and today is just monsoon rains, kind of freak storm. And then tomorrow we'll be pumping the water out, and then it'll be back to normal, sunny, desert, beautiful skies out here in Dubai. So yeah, it's been an interesting day this year, to say the least.
So you grew up in Central New York, and I love your backstory, which is you kind of got the taste of what it's like to organize things from your mom because she organized your large family. Tell us a little bit about your mom.
Yeah, well, good gosh, where do we even start? My mom and my stepfather. I mean, it's just it's a tandem. I call them the tag team, and they really were the ones that kind of, with 7 kids in our house, kind of Brady Bunch set up, and they were always planning things because every year something was going on with one of the kids, and we always were planning parties or planning events or planning outings. And, I was just one of those guys that just kind of watched, my parents and mostly my mom kind of plan out a lot of the things, activities, and I had to be part of those things. And so I just kind of mentally kind of took mental notes and kind of picked up on things that she would do. And one thing I did learn was extreme patience, especially when you're dealing with 7 kids and a multitude of other kids in the neighborhood that would be invited to these different events and stuff. So between my parents' business, they co-founded Eastern Copy Products, a big copier dealership that back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, 2000s was a big copier dealership in upstate New York. So, just learning from them was an invaluable experience, and it laid a very good base groundwork to kind of go off of in terms of being able to plan large-scale events that I do these days.
So I was going to ask you about Eastern Copy Products. They are still here in Central New York, but when you were here and your family started it was a family business. And I'm guessing that everybody in the family had a little bit of some business jobs to do. Tell me about how you worked in the company.
Yeah, it was whatever needed. I mean, and back in the 70s, it was, if they had business shows coming up, I mean, there's no internet, barely computers and everything. So we had to do stuffing of envelopes for business shows at the Center Progress building, for instance, in the State Fairgrounds, or any events going on that we had to do. We had to work in the office itself, whether it was mowing the lawns or cleaning the office, or if it was when they started their Vendicopy division, the coin-operated copiers, we'd go out and clean copiers and collect the coins, and we'd be at home counting the coins on a Las Vegas-style coin counter we had in our house, believe it or not. So, and taking the money to the bank and dealing with deposits. I mean, you were always involved in every aspect of activity with the company, and so it's one of those things where you just learn so much stuff from just being involved in the family business. And while their kids were out playing, I was stuffing envelopes and doing all kinds of activities. But that's the way it was, and I don't regret any of it, and none of us kids do, because it really taught us better for later in life how to handle and manage things better.
So you grew up in Central New York, and a lot of people, when they go to college, like to get as far away from home as possible. But you took another route. Tell us your Oswego origin story.
It kind of was funny. I got accepted to universities, and I was actually supposed to go to Geneseo State, and with my buddy Chris from Camillus. That's where I grew up, in Camillus, New York. And he and I were going to be roommates. It was going to be great. And then I got accepted academically, but they had no place to put me for the housing. And so my backup plan, and at the same time, my one sister was at Columbia for her MBA. My brother was at Syracuse. My other sister was at Cornell. And I was just like, wow, I just said, I'm going to go still stay in the state program. And I got accepted to Oswego. And at that time, it was computer science was my major. And I went on the site visit. And ironically, the site visit was the last happy hour on campus at the student union, at the Hewitt Student Union. And my mother saw the line upstairs. She's like, oh, are people going to the bookstore? And they're like, no, it's the last happy hour on campus. And before the drinking age changed from 19 to 21. And she's like, thank God. So that was when I got accepted. And my tour at Oswego was on the last happy hour on campus back in 1985. So it was pretty momentous. But that's where, once I got up to Oswego, I just kind of felt right at home. And it just kind of fit like a good shoe and everything. So that's kind of the origin of how I got to Oswego.
So I'm going to date myself. Computer science, when I was there, was punch cards. And you obviously moved from computer science to marketing, but tell us a little bit about what was computer science like when you got there.
Well, like you said, I remember when we did registration, you had to go to the big campus center, where the basketball arena was, up by Romney Fieldhouse. And you had to go and get your punch cards and wait in line for the class you wanted and go get the punch cards and everything and submit them to the registrar and whatnot. And that was the first year. And then in my sophomore year, that's when they went to an IT side. But I mean, when I started computer programming in 1986, now mind you, we've had the Macintosh, the Lisa computers and all that stuff. When we wanted computer programming and Fortran, it was the Burroughs, 1980s Burroughs computer system where you type a line of code, it'd scan it, and then you type your next line of code. And then you had to send it to a compiler. And 30 minutes later, then you'd get your results, and then you'd have to see where you had to adjust your programming and everything. And I was like, oh my gosh, there's got to be a better way. So when we started Oswego there in 85, it was that pivot transition, that digital pivot that was kind of taking place and during that time. So yeah, it was a very different time frame compared to what it is now, where everything's on your phone. But yeah, it was, but you had to adjust to it. I mean, it's the only way you knew and what you knew, and you dealt with it and you rolled with it, and you kind of enjoyed the complexities of it, and you learn the nuances of how to get a better class and everything, and swapping cards around with each other. So that's what you did at Oswego, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I was with the cards, exactly what you described. Even though I'm class of 85, I totally remember that with the cards. So I love that you brought that up. You eventually graduated with a marketing degree. So somewhere while you were there, you kind of shifted. How did that happen?
Yeah, it was. I decided that computer programming wasn't my thing. I loved technology and everything, but it was my brother Vince, who was marketing business at Syracuse University. He's like, you need to change your major to marketing. You're better suited for that. And so I went through the process with Professor Ingram in the School of Business, and worked with him as my advisor during the changeover that had to take place. I had to take summer school to take, accounting classes and a couple other classes to kind of switch over from computer science into School of Business and marketing. So that obviously took a lot of time to go through that process. But once I got into it, it was transformative, because I finally found my niche, and I found my home in marketing and business classes, and being around the students that were there from all over, not only New York, but around the States and around the world there. And just the great instructors that I had as part of school of business with Doc Molinari and Professor Ingram and just so many more. I mean, Professor Lundy with accounting, credit debit, and Dr. Ntoko with credit debit to net ratio factor of annuities and things that you never really thought of. But then also the classes I think that helped round my experience out of Oswego was creative writing. That I love that class, and just having the educational background that Oswego was known for, taking classes like that really have helped me in my transition into the business side, and really still keeps me afloat today, relying on those things that I learned there at Oswego.
Were there any clubs and after class activities, groups that you joined that kind of fired you up for your success later on?
Yeah, American Marketing Association, and and we just had, I mean, it was just that kind of that time where we just had that really good core group of students in the School of Business there that were part of the AMA. And we just did a lot of things together. My friend Conchance Schwartz, who a lot of the Oswego alumni know, with her company SMAC, and then Russ Finley and Gary Hughes, and a whole bunch of us were just involved in all of these programs. And that really kind of strengthened my resolve in terms of the marketing side. And shoot, I mean, in our senior year, we created the BAD weekend, which was the Business Administration Department weekend. And we worked with Doc Molinari and Professor Ingham and all the School of Business professors. And on Friday night, we did a big roast dinner and everything. And I was the MC, and we had all the professors there from School of Business and students. And it was a good mix of intermingling with each other. And then we had all these events going on, and we ended up having kind of a event where all the students come out and be a part of it, not only School of Business, but other students as well. And it was just a great way to kind of take all these things that we learned throughout the 4 years there, to plan of major events and for the campus, and really kind of test out the waters of what we were going to possibly go into for future careers once we got out of there. So those are the type of clubs that I was involved in on the academic side for that. But always involved in the stuff with the dorm, because I lived on the 4th floor of Hart for 4 years. And just enjoyed it immensely, sometimes too much, but it was a great way to interact with so many people from so many different backgrounds and cultures, which I really wasn't exposed to growing up upstate New York.
So many of the people I talked to say, when they graduated, there was somebody that they went to school with or an alumnus who helped them get their first job. I know you took off for Orlando and was working on the World Cup. Is there an alumni connection that got you there?
That was actually a lot of me, believe it or not. But I will say that the mentors that I had at Oswego helped drive the thought process of where I was going. One was Professor Ingram was hugely critical because I did my internship at Oswego at Walt Disney World, and I was part of the college program there. And I wasn't doing academically great, and the dean of the assistant dean of the school wasn't too sure about letting me go. And Professor Ingram, put his head out and kind of said, "Hey, this kid's got some talent. He's got it going. And what can he learn being an attractions host?" Because I started out at 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea as a captain of a submarine, and whatnot. And then eventually, after a month, I was selected to be part of the Disney MGM Studios grand opening team, which now is called Hollywood Studios. And actually, on May 3rd, the 35th anniversary of the opening of the park, but I worked on the grand opening of that, managing the foreign media for the event. And so all along, but when I did my interview with Disney back in 1988 in the fall, it was Dr. Benjamin, who was there, Richard Benjamin, and he gave me the best advice that I still use to this day. And that is, I said, "Dr. Benjamin, the biggest interview I've ever had was at Burger King in Fairmount." And I'm like, "How do I handle this interview with Disney?" And he's like, "Derrick, it's real simple. Sit up straight, smile, and be yourself." And you know what? I still use that today. And it's just kind of those things, that touch points that people, Doc Molinari, kind of invested a lot of time in getting my mind right about pursuing things that you want. And so, obviously I had the stuff that my parents and my siblings and all that stuff. But when I moved to Orlando, where I didn't know anybody, and set out on this dream to work in events, I had a good basis to draw from because I had so many great professors that basically, stood up for me and kind of gave me advice and kind of directed me where, I needed to go. And, I never forget that. I'm forever grateful for that because, it's made me who I am today, where, I've got a background with Oswego and got my Oswego stuff here. And, but it's just, but that kind of set a very good, strong foundation because, they never let us use that. They never let us use the excuse that, oh, well, we're just from a small school and everything. They're like, you're going to come here, you're going to learn stuff, and you're going to take that stuff and you're going to apply it and you're going to be successful. And I have no qualms of telling people all the time that, I went to Oswego State, and they're like, where? And I use the old hand thing. It's like, this is a state of New York, here's Syracuse, here's Lake Ontario, here's New York City. Here, here's Oswego right up here in Lake Ontario, Rochester over to here where Kodak and Xerox are and everything. And then when I move to Florida, I just flip it and I'm like, this is Florida. Here's Miami. Here's Orlando. So I'd have to use that because they're like, Oswego, where's that? And so I had to use that a lot to demonstrate where it was. But, it's the qualities that I learned and the studies that I learned and the people that I was surrounded by. As well, I was able to draw a lot of stuff that I used to lay the groundwork once I moved to Orlando to start working in events.
I love your story in Orlando. So many of us, when we graduate, we really want, first of all, you leave home. I know you spend time at Disney and an internship, but you leave home and you say, I'm going to work in Orlando. And then you go to work for a brand new company that is trying to convince the city of Orlando that the World Cup is a good idea. And I love the line that I found in my research from you is, the owners of the company basically said, here's the phone book. I cannot even imagine what kind of confidence you had to say, okay, I'll take that phone book and I'm going to talk to everybody.
That's right. And it was, I met the folks that were bidding on the World Cup, FIFA World Cup 94, and this is 1992. Because I went down there with my fellow class, like Mark Siegerman, unfortunately, who's passed away. And we went and worked on the qualifying draw at the Madison Square Garden in New York. And I just cold called them in their DC office. And I said, hey, I want to come and work. I just graduated and I got my friend and we want to work, and he works in media as well. And so we went down and worked on that. And while we were working there, at the end of the event, the people from Orlando came out and they said, hey, we're looking for this videotape. And I'm like, oh, I used to work in Orlando at Disney and whatnot. And they're like, well, we're bidding on it. If anything happens, give us a call. And Orlando got selected in March of 92. And that's when I went home, told my parents, I'm like, I'm moving to Orlando. I got to go there because that's where the opportunity's at. And so I moved down there, walked in their office for the World Cup host committee. It was formed. They had the host committee there. And I said, hi, I'm Derrick. I'm the guy that you met in New York a few months back and everything. And I'm here to help you guys out. And they're like, great, here's a phone book. Start calling people and start promoting the FIFA World Cup matches to people. So found an open desk and I just started calling up businesses and I'm like, hey, do you want to be involved? And, and they gave me a one sheet that I could read statistics and stuff from and was able to just kind of just go at it. And I just drew on my experience from my family's company, which is all sales, copier sales and stuff, and stuff we learned at Oswego. And we would just start calling people because I learned from my parents, what's the worst they can say? No. Okay. And if you get a yes, hey, that's great. So that's how we started. And then that kind of started the process going of hey, we need to bring out more events like World Cup to Orlando. My friend Joni Sherm and Charlie Williams and a whole host of others helped bring World Cup there prior to me getting there. So when I got there, they said, well, there's more events out there than World Cup. What else can we go and do and find? And so they're like, well, Derrick, you've done this event stuff before. Because not only did I do stuff at Oswego and my internship at Disney, but I also volunteered since I was in high school with the Syracuse Sports Corporation, which was one of the first sports commissions in the United States, where they would go and bid on events to bring economic impact to the community. And so I had that experience again to draw from, of managing and hosting events on a very, regional scale, IRA regattas on Onondaga Lake and the Empire State Games and things of that magnitude. And so, so they said, well, you've done this before. And I'm like, yeah. And he says, well, here's some other people, go figure it out. And we went and over a course of weeks and months started developing the formation of what we called the Orlando Area Sports Commission. And in essence, I helped create my first job when I was 23, and really just went out in dogged pursuit of just now understanding what we needed to do to bring more events to the Central Florida area. So yeah, my first few months in Orlando was working odd jobs at night and then volunteering during the day, calling people up and doing minuscule work just to help promote the community in Orlando area for FIFA World Cup.
So this other quote from you that I found, you're working 77 days a week, 60-hour weeks for not a lot of pay. Two of the numbers that I found hilarious is when the county gave you a budget, they said $250,000 for the first 2 years. That's what you're going to operate on. And you're not the only person that works at this company. But then when you leave, something like $90 billion in economic impact for the city and surrounding counties of Orlando.
90 million.
Billion.
I wish it was. I wish it was billion.
Hey, let's stick with billion. Let's see if anyone fact checks me.
That's right. Hey, wow, Derrick's an incredible salesman.
Derrick's amazing. 90 billion. Okay, 90 million.
Yeah. Go ahead.
That over the course of how many years, and then what leads you to leave?
It's once we got the sports commission up and running and the funding for that, it was such a surreal thing, because imagine you're given money and it says, oh wait, by the way, you got 2 years and figure it out. And so we went the first year, we bid on 12 events, including the Olympic soccer matches for the 96 games in Atlanta, because Atlanta couldn't host all the preliminary rounds. So they picked 4 cities. In Orlando, because we were getting ready to host FIFA World Cup in 94, this is when the bid was in 93. They selected Orlando to host the matches in our first year. And so my boss and I, that was a 285-page bid, 2-volume bid that we wrote. And talk about creative writing from Oswego being used. Man, I put that to good use right away. And we wrote the bid and we're successful on that. And then we bid on U.S. Field Hockey Festival, USA Volleyball Junior Olympic Championships, and a lot of major events that needed a home. And Orlando had the things, the facilities to handle these things. And the first year, after bidding on the 12, we landed 9 for an economic impact of $39 million in our first year. I mean, talk about community leaders' jaws on the floor. I mean, they couldn't believe that sports is big business. And at the time, Disney was toying with the idea of doing a sports complex, which is a $100 million complex that they now have, called Disney's Wide World of Sports. And it was one of those things where it was an eye-opener for not only myself, but the community. But it was just me, my boss, Charlie, and an assistant and an intern. And we did all this on our own. So yeah, I was working all the time, but it wasn't work to me because it was what I wanted to do. It was that passion project that I had and everything and whatnot. And so really, it's just one of those things where you have to believe in your abilities and all that stuff, because at the end of the day, if you don't have faith in what you learned from all the different experience that you've taken, and you don't go and pursue that in a very aggressive way, then you're never going to. That's one thing I learned about getting these events was it just was a passion project. I had no life. My life was my job, but I didn't care because I was in a new community. I had to prove myself. I had to take all the things that I had in the back of my head and apply them in very different ways. Because, the way you deal with volleyball people is different than the way you deal with field hockey people, the different way you deal with Olympic people. And so you have to learn from all that, excuse me, on that. And so you have to really get that focus. And so, so that was a way that we became successful. And because that was a way also to continue the funding through the tourist development funds of the local region and promoting sports, because we were given great advice when we first started out from a woman who was in the industry. And she goes, the only difference between Orlando's a very big convention town. Everybody's coming here to meet. But she's like, but events, instead of meeting, they're competing. And but they all need a hotel room to stay in, a rental car to rent, and food to eat, and attractions and amusement things to keep them active. And so you're no different than a convention. And so we took that approach. And so we went and did an inventory of all the sports facilities in Central Florida, because you never know what you can market until you know what you got. So once we established that baseline, then we were able to just succeed each and every year since then. And so, but, after 5 years of being the events director and growing from a staff of 3 to a staff of 12 and becoming one of the biggest sports commissions in the United States in the 5-year time frame, and under great managements that we had throughout the time, it was just kind of, there's other things out there that I wanted to go and do. And so made some great relationships with people at the United States Olympic Committee. And, once I decided to leave the sports commission world and go out as an independent contractor, that was where I kind of gained my wings, as they say, because now that I had all this great experience that I accumulated at the sports commission, which, by the way, they just completed their 30th anniversary of being an organization, and the economic impact of all the events over the decades has been about $1 billion to the Central Florida community. So, I'm really proud of that, because I know what it took in the beginning to get that thing off the ground with my partners, with Joni and Charlie and a host of others. And, I left with a great sense of accomplishment. But now there's new worlds to go out and conquer, as they say. And that's exactly what I went out and did.
People who start their own businesses, it's a little bit like jumping off a cliff. You have this really solid ground when you're working for an organization, you're getting that paycheck. Now, all of a sudden, you're just going to kind of jump. What was that like?
It's not for the faint of heart. As I say, you go from the filet mignon dinner circuit to the ramen noodle circuit. So you learn to conserve your energy, time, and money when you go out on your own. You have to have unbelievable confidence, because you have to keep. Now what happens is now I use that time during the sports commission to build my brand. And so, as I tell the university students, as I told the Oswego State students a few months back when I was on campus, I says, your name is a brand. What are you doing to make it relevant? And so I constantly work to create a brand. So when people said Derrick Salisbury, like, that guy's a worker. And that's a guy that I'll have work on my projects that help support my operations. And so in the beginning, I dealt with, and I went to them as a consultant. And then that kind of built the groundwork. And then my good friend Tony was building his event transport company at the same time in 1998. And so I hooked up with him, and that's how I got on board with understanding event transportation, all that stuff. I dealt with it at the sports commission because I had to do everything from venue management, transport management, ticketing, security, bidding, sales, revenue, finance, whatever it may be. But I didn't, now I was doing a deep dive into kind of event transport, but I also wanted to do other things and continue doing venue management and things of that sort. So once I got connected with Tony, that's when I got kind of connected into the Super Bowl grid that he got his company involved in. And then also Salt Lake Olympics in 2002, Salt Lake Winter Olympics. He brought me up there to work on transport with that side. And so that's where I kind of, once I got out of the sports commission, I started getting into the global kind of event consulting side of things and just learning. and constantly learning. And the other thing too is I just brought that crazy work ethic where I'll just outwork everybody. I will take the jobs that no one else wants and I'll do them, because it's just, that's how I know how you progress in this very, very competitive industry.
I love this story back in Orlando where you would go to the fields. You were talking about knowing your inventory. You would go to the soccer stadiums or the rodeo stadiums. You would measure the fields because nobody had a book that described all of the venues in Orlando. So you'd be out there measuring how big the fields were.
Yeah. You don't know what you got until you know what you got. And you don't want the market until you know what you got. So we had to do an inventory of things. And so that's just, on the venues side. But then you had to do an inventory of all your housing, hotels that you have. And you have to do inventory of the rental cars that you have. And you have to do inventory. So you have to do inventory. So you have to know a broad spectrum of what you need to do. And so I took that understandings. So when I would go into an Olympic environment or a FIFA environment or any other major event, it's assess the situation, take a look at what you got, what support, what assets do you have, and then how do you make those things work. And that was the big thing that a lot of people don't realize is it takes a lot of work to figure that stuff out. And you really got to spend the time. And it's tough. It's everybody's like, well, I got a family, I've got this, I've got that. And I get it, but that's part of what the job, that's why getting into the events industry is a very different mindset than it would be working in a bank or working at an architecture firm or stuff like that, knocking those fields because they're great fields. But, when you work in events, you're working odd hours. You're working on time frames that are not normal to people. You're hopping on a plane, flying halfway across the world to go and deliver for a client and all that. And you may only be in market for 3 days, and you got to hop on a plane and fly on back and then come back. Or you're gone for, 6 weeks doing a Super Bowl. And when you come home, it's just like, I just want to sit on my couch and watch the Masters golf tournament and turn my phone off and not hear from anybody. So it's a kind of, it's a different mindset. And like I said, you learn those things by doing.
There are so many great stories. This one, though, in particular, shows how willing you are to do whatever it takes. Tell me about the Queen's Swans in London. And if you didn't get it right, you could have been beheaded.
True. This is a true story. So I was working as a broadcast manager at London 2012 Olympics. And my good friend, she was one of the heads of broadcast. And so she said, I said, Trish, every day when I go to work, I want to be uncomfortable. Oh, she's like, oh, don't worry. I'm giving you the central London venues, which is going to be the Mall, which is by Buckingham Palace, which is hosting road cycling and marathon runs. And then we had beach volleyball there in that area at Queen's Horse Guards Parade. And then we had on the Serpentine Lake in Hyde Park, we had marathon swim and triathlon. And at that venue, there's a lot of swans there. And so when you deal with broadcast, you're dealing with a lot of cabling, a lot of camera platforms. There we had a lot of motorcycles tracking some of the action. But one of the things we had to do, tall cranes with basically rope going between the distance of about a half a mile between the two cranes. One's anchored in one Royal Park, one's anchored in the other Royal Park. And then he had a sled with a camera that would go back and forth on that. Well, what happened was we got approvals to do the camera, the sky cam and everything. And mind you, this is before drones were in play and everything in 2012. And so basically, they made us do a bird mitigation study with our friends from Olympic Broadcast Services. And they said, because we have to know if there's going to be a bunch of bird strikes that are taking place. And we're like, what? And they were like, so you have to assess previous Olympics and confirm that no birds were killed there. And when they told me this, I asked my coworkers, I'm like, are there power lines in all of England that they have to do this for every square meter for every part of England to put up power lines of bird mitigation study? And they're like, if you want to broadcast there, you got to do it. And so we worked with my friends from OBS. And then what happens, I found out, is that the swans, if any, and the reason why they were concerned is if any birds or the swans are hurt while this thing is up there, then, if you go back in the books in the Tower of London in the 1700s, it's basically those are royal fowl, the swans are. And if any of one of them's killed, they're property of the queen, it's punishable by beheading in the Tower of London. I'm like, what the? You for real? I said, I thought that place was closed when killing people from back in the day, and they're like, oh no, it's still on the books. And so not only did we do a bird mitigation study, but I took it upon myself with my assistant to do a bird avionics study to see how far it would take one of those fat tourist-fed swans to get enough height in the air to hit that damn sled 300 feet in the air and everything. And basically is like they had to go the runway of Heathrow Airport to get enough speed to get that high to hit there. So, those aren't things that you learn in a textbook at Oswego State. Those aren't things that you learn. You're like, okay, let's just figure it out. So we got approvals from the parks, and we had unbelievable TV coverage in Hyde Park for triathlon and marathon swim.
But my favorite part of that story that you left out is you present your study and your findings, because you were able to find the amount of lift that's going to take and how many feet. You found the formula online, and so you used the formula.
I did,
and you presented your findings, and they went, we can't accept
this. I presented my findings to my sustainability department and everything. And then I was very proud of it. I did a lot of work and a lot of research. And I even brought a 50-cent protractor from the freaking store to throw a stone at this bird to get a 10% angle lift, a 10-degree lift and everything. And they looked at me and they're like, but you're not a scientist. We can't use this. Like, yeah, but I did all this research. And like, well, you got to get it certified by somebody, and we don't have time, Derrick. Listen, your bird mitigation thing's fine enough, but thank you. That's very clever of you, and thank you very much. But you're not a scientist, and we can't submit it. And I'm like, okay. So I went to the pub and had a beer. That's all I did.
I love that. That's like a classic Oswego story. I'm not a scientist, but I'll play one on TV.
There you go. Hey, why not? So. Yeah,
people say at the World Cup that one of the great things about your management style is that you ask the question all the time, how can I help you? And
yes.
You might have seen this now everywhere in pop culture, like Ted Lasso's famous for saying it in the show New Amsterdam. The whole thing is based on the head of the hospital saying, how can I help you? So how do you feel that the line that you've been using for decades is now very popular in pop culture?
It's flattering. It's one of those things where, I learned that just because I learned that from my family business, is that my parents would always be checking up on their staff and, how can I help you? How can I help you get better sales? How can I help you with this? How can I help you with this? And I just kind of took that kind of mindset and a lot of the jobs I would do. And because, I had people help me along the way. And I felt that I'm compelled, and I still am to this day, of coming up and asking people, how can I help you? Especially in foreign cultures, it's very important because, when I was working FIFA World Cup as venue manager for FIFA for World Cup 2018 in Russia, my guys and ladies on the local organizing committee, they can take things to a certain level, and then the politics and the bureaucracy all get in the way. And if they ask the wrong person the wrong question, they may not get a paycheck. So that I would always ask them, how can I help you? Derrick, I've reached this point with this, and I need you to help escalate it because you can take it to this level and get resolution on it. And so that's what I would do. I would ask all my functional area managers, how can I help you? Because I understood the limitations that they sometimes have because of the culture of which we're working in and they're operating in. And so if I can use my position to help them out, then I'm going to do it because, we all are as a team. And we all succeed as a team. And it's a whole business cliche everybody hears all the time, but it's true. And that's the way that I felt that I can always differentiate myself from other managers that are out there, because it's a very competitive environment out there between us event gypsies, as we call ourselves, and everything. And, again, that branding thing. But if you show some empathy, that's where you're going to get people to work for you and to be a part of the journey that you guys are on together. And it's not easy, because sometimes there's tons of roadblocks, even in my way. I'm not saying I'm a savior, I can solve everything. But at the end of the day, it's the question that is appropriate to ask and should be asked to your staff and people all the time, because you never know what's going on in their heads. And that's just the way I could get into their heads, is just, how can I help you? And it really wasn't sometimes all business related. Sometimes they'd bring up some personal things that they're dealing with and stuff like that. And so, hey, you need some time off, go do what you got to do, go take care of it and all that stuff. I'll cover for you, or this person will help you out and all that stuff. And sometimes that mindset isn't prevalent in a lot of businesses and everything, because it's a very different market than it was when I started in the business in the late 80s to what it is now, and it's something that I've just adopted as a philosophy.
When I've done events, I always start my team, meeting with a team, and I always say, okay, listen, the first thing we all need to know is something is going to go wrong. Okay. So if we all know that something is going to go wrong, that, when it goes wrong, it's like, oh, that's the thing. I don't follow it up with another thing will then go wrong. One thing's going to go wrong. You've had a couple of challenges, really big challenges, and I have a couple on a list, but I'm going to let you choose. One of the things that you talk about is when really big challenges head your way, something goes wrong, that your key is to remain calm. And that can be really hard. But tell us about a time that, something really went wrong and it tested you on the remaining calm thing.
I think the most recent one was during the Pyeongchang 2018 Winter Olympic Games. And during the Winter Games since 2002 in Salt Lake, I helped support the medaling athlete transport system that basically gets all the gold, silver, and bronze medaling athletes from their competition, non-competitions, whether it was that day, previous day, or the next day. We get them on stage for the Medals Plaza, because of the Winter Games, there's fewer events. So they do a made for TV thing, where in the Summer Games, all the medals ceremonies take place in venue, as they say. So my team, over the decades, we've been responsible for getting the transport and getting in the vehicles with a driver and liaison and meeting all the athletes and bringing them down to Medals Plaza. Well, in between the Olympic and Paralympic Games, we had a very good Olympic Games. We had a very solid team. We got all the athletes and on stage to get their medals, and it was a great experience and just seeing that. But in between, we have a gap, and that's usually a time where I give my staff a couple of days off to kind of recharge their batteries and everything before we go on to Paralympics and the Medals Plaza during the Paralympics. Well, I went out in the morning, and it was a snow blizzard the night before. And so I walked up to our massive ceremonies tent, which not only housed the medaling athlete transport people, but also the production team that put on the ceremonies on stage and all that. And the tent collapsed. And this was 5 days before the Paralympic Games started. So inside were all our computers, all of our files, all of our everything for not only my department, but everybody else. And so I look up and I'm like, oh my gosh. So I immediately call my staff up. I'm like, you're not going home. Just meet me here at the venue right now and everything. We got on the horn, and obviously venue management knew what was going on. So we basically, all of us functional areas got together and we're like, we got to get in there and get our stuff. So we had to have engineers come on and figure out, and eventually had a crane with lift the tent up. And then it had to be certified that it was safe to go in there. So we went in there and got all of our stuff out. And then we had to work remotely, because now the parking lot that I had for all my medaling athlete vehicles was now going to be used for housing for all of us ceremonies and production people and transport So now I have no place to put my vehicles. So we had to do this kind of chess game of moving things around. We had to bring cabins in. We had to wire everything for internet and power. And then we had to reset our operations up. Meantime, we still had to train our drivers on how to work with persons with disabilities and all these things going on. And in the meantime, they still had to clear the old tent out because that needed to be a parking lot in 5 days for my vehicles to park to bring the athletes in. So those 5 days were absolutely just mental because, again, there's nothing that explains to you how to deal with your collapsed building. And then you still have to operate on those timeframes and work in a remote environment and then get everything moved into your new things, get your staff and your volunteers all set up. Because, I had 100 drivers and about 60 staff that were working on different timeframes to help support this operation. And, it was just, and my staff, and trying to keep them motivated and keep them like, hey, it's going to be okay. Don't worry about this minor setback, because they all have never experienced this before. Not to say that I have, but I had to be that calm, cool, collective guy that they could rely on because they feed off of me. And if I go around and I'm always panicked, they're going to be panicked. And so I just had to be that, and I'm the, whether I like it or not, and whether I want it or not, everywhere I go, I represent the United States. I'm not saying that the U.S. State Department's employing me. It's not the case. It's just every American, when you work overseas, you bring with you these mental mindsets that people have of working with Americans. And so they're looking for me not to be this kind of crazy dude, but just how you deal with things and how you respect people and how you treat people. And I'm not saying that doesn't happen with other cultures and everything. It's just that that subconsciously is in the back of my brain, and that is part of my responsibility of working overseas, is not only presenting that calm, cool, collective standpoint, but having some business acumen and how to be professional and how to move things along and make the event successful. So when you have situations that call for dealing with things in a very stressful environment, that you can be that person they can rely on to get you through. And we did. We got through it. We got all the Paralympic athletes on stage. We helped them realize their dreams, and it was successful. But good Lord, man, at the end, there was a party at the end of that event. I'll tell you that.
You went home and disconnected everything and watched Netflix for 5 days.
Oh my gosh. No, it was the beach. I went back to Florida. I went to the beach and we just sat on the beach and just turned the phone off, and I didn't want to talk to anybody.
So I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about what you're doing right now, which is I slow myself down because it's real easy to just say it wrong. TPT Hub. I got
TPT
it.
Hub. The acronym in the events is transportation. So that's kind of what.
There you go. So what I love about it is one of the descriptions of what it does is move people off spreadsheets and have a system that event managers can use to direct their events. And I love that because, again, in doing events, I love a good spreadsheet. So, but to hear that there is a system that tracks it better than that other people, I'm imagining, can log into, that sounds like a great idea. Tell me about it.
Yeah, the concept came about because when I was working on the Winter Olympics in Sochi, Russia, every sport, even in Pyeongchang, it was on Google Docs or spreadsheets. And one of my deputies who was working with me, he was a computer programmer, and he's like, why are we doing it like this? He goes, we can create a software that builds, that does all this stuff, and we can make an app that works for it and everything. And I'm like, all right, let's give it a shot, man. So once the games were done, we started working together while I was still doing other events and everything around the globe. And, eventually it came to be that in 2017, we were able to test the software out during the Confederations Cup in 4 cities in Russia. They were getting ready to host FIFA World Cup in 2018 and for match hospitality. And it worked out very well in those 4 cities of planning things where now all the drivers' things were planned in there. You can bulk up of things in spreadsheets, but you could also input things in the system. So you create almost like a folio for a driver, a folio for a passenger, a folio for the vehicle. And then everything was shift based. And so you would assign a driver to a shift, a vehicle to a shift, and then a booking to a shift that has a driver and vehicle attached to it. And then once you do all those bookings, then what you do is then it goes to the app for the passenger or the driver, like Uber does. But Uber just cares about point A to point B, where our system takes into account the location of the venue. And if there's road closures because of the event itself, then it takes into account that, and we can program the routings in through the back of house software, and it takes you, the drivers, on the journey the way that you want them to go. And so we figured out that solution, and it worked out really well. And then we used it in 11 cities and with 30 different vendors and 1,500 drivers and 500 hosts and 1,200 vehicles, and World Cup with 98% success rate. And they're able to close the event down in 2 weeks financially, which is unheard of in the industry. So we got some traction there. Then we got involved with Expo 20 Dubai, which was the World's Fair that was taking place. And then their fleet department started using our software. And then, so now we realize is like, well, if we created this core that deals with just fleet vehicles, because Expo 2020 Dubai had 400 Nissan vehicles and minibuses, and then 750 golf carts and 1,200 pieces of logistics equipment. So each day our system was managing 1,200 pieces of equipment and hundreds of drivers every day, managing a 6-month-long event. And so then we realized, well, we can develop a delivery management system, because that relies on pretty much the same core, planning deliveries for, if you have 10 loading bays, you can plan that out. And then, what about an arrivals and departures system? So now we take in planning of arrivals and departures from spreadsheets and created a whole card system where you drag and drop, and the system figures out suggestions of who can be lumped with who, and it plans the whole routing for that. So there's lots of different ways that we took from just a core idea, and now we've developed almost 9 modules that can help support the whole events industry, to help make the job that was so laborious for me back in the day and my coworkers on so many different events, that our motto is work smarter, not harder. And that we tell them that it's our software designed by event professionals for event professionals, because we are involved in it every day still. And so we're just not some computer wonks coming in that don't understand the industry. Is, again, that whole empathy thing, is we understand what you, the event manager, are going through, and we're trying to get you off the spreadsheets. That's why our motto is #no more spreadsheets, and trying to get you to move in a direction and pivot to the mobile device. And that's what we slowly are doing. And it's not easy, because you're changing a complete mindset of people, and we call it the digital pivot. And it's here. The digital pivot's here. And if you're on the front side of that wave, man, you're going to ride it good. If not, you don't know when the next set of waves are going to come to push you toward the shore, which is going to get you to that success. And that's the mindset that we're trying to deploy in the events world, to try to get people to utilize their technology.
Well, once you've seen it working that way, it would be really hard to go back to spreadsheets.
Of course. Oh, everybody, all of our clients, we have so many different clients. They come to us and they're just like, we just deployed a logistics management system for our client Expo City Dubai, which is the World's Fair sites now, a municipality. And we just deployed that for them to help deal with their service requests and work orders. And it has taken off so well with them, because it used to all be done through spreadsheets and WhatsApp chat groups and everything. And now everything's on a system where everybody can communicate together. Management and everybody down below can see where statuses are and where things are. And they've never had that before, because it was grossly inefficient, but that's the only way they knew, right? I mean, that's the only way I knew for decades, was spreadsheets. So us and a bunch of our software partners in the events world are working to try to change that mindset and that dynamic, how you manage things better.
We're a couple of months away from the Paris Olympics. Is that your next big event?
Yeah, we'll have activity going on with the Paris 24 games. We'll be working with Team Canada. The Canadian Olympic Committee will be utilizing our software to help manage their fleet operations while they're in market for the Olympic Games. So we'll be happy to be involved with them again. We were just with them in this past December at the Pan American Games in Santiago, Chile. Because our app is multilingual, it allows drivers to speak in their native language and dispatch to speak English or French, and then they can communicate in their language and just tap the screen and they can communicate all in the same way. So that's another, again, pivot that we're making people aware of, is that you have to be cognizant of these cultural differences of what's going on. So we'll be there, and also there's a lot of meetings that go on around the Olympic Games. So we'll have a presence in Paris, meeting up with our friends that we've known for decades in the industry to talk business and future development.
And the World Cup will be coming to the New York City area in a couple of years, right?
Mm-hmm. That's correct.
You'll be on your home turf here.
Well, we're talking to the people that are involved in the organizing committee. Obviously, I know a lot of them because I reported to them. I worked with them in World Cup 2018, and so it's Canada, USA, and Mexico, which is the first time it's ever been done. So yeah, there's tremendous amounts of opportunities, and then Los Angeles 2028 Summer Olympics are taking place, and their planning is going forward. And then in the news, you see this past week, the International Olympic Committee was just up in Salt Lake City, and they're probably going to be announcing in July of this year in Paris, the Salt Lake will be awarded the 2034 Olympic Games, which is the irony of ironies, because that's where me and a lot of my other friends in the events industry got our start, at Salt Lake 2002. So we joke that it's going to be the 32-year reunion of us old farts going up there and playing in the Olympics and then going down to Key West and sitting there and just having a cocktail or two when it's done. So yeah, so there's lots of activity going on in the next 10 years, both in the United States and Australia, with large scale events being hosted in those markets. And so obviously we want to try to work and support those events with our software. And that's just time to put your marketing cap on and go out there and see how many yeses that we can get.
So 2 more questions. I know we've had a lot of time today, but boy, yeah, you've had an amazing career.
It's been fun.
You just came back from Oswego. You went to the business department and talked to the kids. You brought an Olympic torch. I love it. What did you find? What surprised you about the students that you met while you were there?
You know, they're curious. You know, I've been fortunate to work with a younger demographic in a lot of the events that I'm a part of, and my programmers are the younger demographic as well. And you know, they think and operate differently than you and I did back in the late 80s and mid 80s and late 80s and everything. But it's still the good basis there, because you know, the professors there demand you to know your stuff. And I was very impressed with the marketing students that I met. Obviously, they were the beginnings in the marketing, so they're kind of trying to learn about the things there. But you know, they were very engaging, and they were attentive. And you know, obviously, sports does that, because people. One thing that I learned that crosses all boundaries in the world is sport. And so obviously I use sport as a good way to get a message across to them. And so I was able to talk to them in a language that they understand, you know, because I've learned from all of my different staffs around the world that are their same age, and, you know, and maybe guide them in some direction. I know that, you know, some are going to be very attentive, some are going to be passive, and some are going to fall asleep. You know, that's normal in everyday life and all that stuff. But if you just reach those few, those are the people that you can mentor and bring along. And so that's what was enjoyable. And then I met with the student athletes, and obviously they're very engaged, just because, you know, they're not only competing for Oswego State, which I think is great and allows me to wear stuff like this and promote them, but also to kind of help guide them that, you know, if their sports career doesn't happen, here's the opportunities that are out there for you, and you have to go out and pursue it. No different than the way I was mentored by, you know, all the great people I talked about at Oswego. You know, any part of the alumni network at Oswego that, you know, we just wanted to say is, like, if you need help or need guidance, hit us up, you know. I mean, but that's on you. You got to take the work. You got to spend the time, and you got to do this, you know, instead of Instagramming and being stuck in this all the time. You know, just do just those little things that will differentiate you. And I'll never forget, I was in Professor Hickey's class in consumer behavior. And the first day of class at Oswego for that, he said, look to your left and look to your right. He goes, those may be your best friends, but when it comes time for you to get out of here at Oswego State, they're your competition. And what are you going to do to differentiate yourself from that, your friends sitting to your left and to your right? And I was like, boom. I mean, that was the last thing I was expecting on the first day of class, but he was so right about that. And so those little things that you can impart on the future students there at Oswego, I mean, it's why I don't mind going back. And it's not only Oswego. I talk to many student groups all over the world when I travel. I make it a point to call them up and say, hi, you don't know me, but this is what I do. And I'd love to come talk to your students because, when I started out, I didn't have that, sports kind of thing. I had to kind of figure it out. And but I had good mentors along the way that kind of pushed me a little bit more forward each way. And, if I can be that guy and talking to the students like that and bring the Olympic torch and let them hold a piece of history, then I have no problem doing it. I think it's great.
My last question is always the same, and you've kind of touched on it a little bit, but I'm going to ask it anyhow. If you were being handed an Oscar, I don't know why, but if you were being handed an Oscar, who during your time at Oswego would you want to thank? We're not going to play you off. You get to, look back and it could be students or it could be teachers, but who would you like to thank for the success that you've had?
I'll say this, my classmates that lived on fourth floor of Hart Hall. It may sound odd, but I learned so much from so many people every year because obviously the people graduate, people cycle through. And all those 4 years, or 3.5, I should say, the half I was at Disney. But those 3.5 years, I always met great people that I'm still friends with to this day. And we all are on Facebook together and all that stuff. And, I don't know. I don't know why I said that. Just because I just met up with one of my roommates that's in Buffalo, Brian Thomas, Mr. Pot Pie, as we call him, as he's known. But it's just all these people that I got to meet on fourth floor Hart. Those are the people that kind of taught me about music and taught me about this. And, and this guy Chip was there to help me with my computer programming things I had no clue about. And he was nice to help out. And then the pitch card games that took place in the TV lounges and the laughs that took place after coming back from the pubs at night in the TV lounge. And just, all those things just kind of, are the people that kind of, if I was giving out an award, those would be some of the people that I would thank on top of my professors and mentors and all that stuff. And then, I would just say that that is one of the places. And I would also thank the bars on the Four Corners, Buckland's, Broadwell's, the Shed, and whatnot.
Do you actually want to thank them, or?
I would, because those places provided the laugh track of my experiences at Oswego. I mean, I can't tell you the fun that took place in those establishments back in those days that just made me who I am. It was just because it can't be all work. You got to have some fun and let your hair down, as they say. And those places just allowed you as a student to kind of just let it go, man. And that may sound odd. I'm probably the only alumni in your podcast that probably wants to thank the bars at the Four Corners, but I'm going to do it because, at the end of the day, you gotta have some levity in life. And those places, while I was at Oswego, provided the levity that I needed based upon the course load and the demands that you had to graduate on time.
We have had some shout outs to Lil's and to the Shacky Patch.
Oh, the Shacky Patch. Good Lord. Yeah. let's take our downstairs living room and convert it to a bar in our house. And let's make
girl drinks, sweet drinks that girls will drink.
That too.
All right. Well, I have taken up so much of your time, but I really want to thank you. I know it's a different time zone and it's the end of your day. So I do want to say thanks so much for spending all this time with us. I appreciate it, Derrick.
Well, thank you so much. And like I said, any students that want to reach out, I'm on LinkedIn, and hit me up there, and I'm happy to help them out in any way possible. And hi to all my fellow alumni that are watching this. And come on out to Dubai when it's not raining. It's a wonderful place. The holiday.
And you stole my last line. So I always say you can find Derrick Salisbury. You put out your email address, which is okay, right?
Yeah, not a problem.
Okay. At ds@tpthub.com. And also on LinkedIn, he has this really great series called Things I've Learned. So definitely check that out. You do a great job on that, Derrick.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
And if you want to reach out to us with guest ideas, you can find us on Facebook or LinkedIn, or you can email us at alumni@oswego.edu. We are always looking for ideas from our over 92,000 alumni. For the Oswego Alumni Podcast, I'm Dee Perkins.